All the pretty girls stand up. All the pretty boys stand up.
Pretty boys in the building.
Sway. This right here is my sway. Sway. All the girls are on me. Damn. Everybody pay attention. This right here is my pretty boy sway. 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 Girls on my rank. When I'm pretty, sway. Girl, screw my name. When I'm pretty, sway. Pretty boy, sway. Pretty boy, sway. 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 Girl on my rank. When I'm pretty boy, sway. Girl, screw my name. When I'm pretty boy, sway.
Soldier.
Get out the way. Pretty boy coming through.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another stream with Swaggle Haas. Happy Sunday to you all out there. Thanks so much for tuning into the show tonight because we got another good one. Because occasionally we like to put together the collector call-in show, which means that it's not about what I have to say, but it's about what you have to say. The real true fans of this hobby. Now, I posed the question in the title description, are collectors feeling good or bad about the hobby these days? Now, we don't have to talk about that, but it's just a little bit of a way for us to frame the conversation. I'm actually genuinely really curious. How are people doing out there? What are you guys feeling good about? What are you guys feeling bad about? There's lots to feel good about. People love the Daredevil show. There's a lot of great indie comics, current comics going on that are really, really great. Great storylines, great artwork, original art's really fun. There's some really great content being produced in the comic collecting world. On the other side of it, there's things to maybe not be so feeling good about. We still have the situation going on with Diamond. We've had more layoffs. People in CGC or people have been reporting that CGC still has issues with Bengate. It's been a little bit quiet for some time about Bengate, but people still talking about it. So maybe you're still feeling bad about that if you've been somebody who's been submitting comics in for grading. So, really the purpose of the show is to, get people on and talk about some of the things that they're feeling out there. And, if you don't want to talk about any of that stuff, you just want to share with what you've been picking up, that's welcome too. So I'm going to put a link to the live stream in the description. You guys can hop on in there. Also paste it right here. Now the StreamYard. So you brave comic book collectors out there, people willing to get on screen and give us their not rants, share some stories, talk about how you're feeling out there in the hobby these days. The link is open to anyone who wants to jump on. Now, a couple little caveats and rules. Okay. Like, please have your camera on, it's just, I don't want to get a strike. I don't want to get a strike for you coming on here and, it's like, I don't know, you're like shirtless or, you're in the bathroom or something weird like that. Can't allow that. We're not going to allow that tonight. Special rules, special privileges go to those that I know. If I know you, I'm willing to have you not be on camera. Although I think it's a better viewing experience for everybody out there if you are on camera. You know what I mean? Don't you guys think that? Isn't it like easier to watch, even if you're just listening? Just the fact that that they're on screen makes it a more pleasurable experience. I don't know. That's my opinion. Anyways, let's carry on here and say hello to everybody in the chat as people filter in. We got Derek in the house. What's going on, Derek? Good to see you. Always holding it down. Appreciate you. All your support. Being a great member. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate you. Flipping page Z. Swag. The channel's doing great. Keeps on growing. Congrats. Flipping page. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's funny when you do YouTube. Especially like the way that I do it, which is just like, I'm in here just making stuff. I don't know. Is it good? Is it bad? I have no clue. But it's nice to hear that people like it. We got GT Key Comic in the house. What's going on, GT Key Comic? I think that's a first, that you are not the first. Could be. We got Eli in the house right here. What's going on, man? DJ K300, music entrance. Nice. Yeah, DJ K, we're trying to step it up a little bit. I've been having the music entrance. I've done some other things. I've had some other, intros and stuff that I put together, but I kind of feel like, it's already long as it is. I don't want the intro to be too ridiculous. We got 99 Newsstand in the house. What's going on, Manu? Good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. And then we got some other people, other people hopping in slowly but surely. And again, link is in the description, guys. Link is in the chat. I'll put it in once again so that people can hop in if they feel like it. I mean, if they don't feel like it, that's fine. We'll just have a solo show. I'll just keep going. I'm just going to keep talking. Here's a little pro tip from me as a YouTuber. The things that I've learned in my experience doing YouTube, in case you're somebody out there that one day wants to start a YouTube channel, just keep talking. Just keep talking. Like right now, like I'm not present in my own mind. I don't know what's going to be the next word that comes out of my mouth until it happens right now, because you keep talking and you keep filling up time because nobody is in the backstage. So you have to keep going, but it's okay. It's okay. I accounted for this. And I have other topics to talk about. I have other things that I can solo on. But why don't we do this as people still filter in? We'll do a little bit more housekeeping, Okay. A little bit of a shameless promotion, shameless plug. If you guys don't know, I work with 24/7 Comics as a creative over there. Shout out to the team over at 24/7. We have a Kickstarter going on for Bladesmyth. This is a wonderful kind of a Bruce Lee inspired Jackie Chan chef meets John Wick martial arts, drawn by Chris Lee, written by Justin Callan Chen and Linji Park. 3 days left on the Kickstarter. 3 days left on the Kickstarter. So if you guys are interested in checking it out, Kickstarter Bladesmyth, check out the trailer. I won't belabor it. I won't talk about it the whole time. It's just a little thing. Just throwing it out there. Anyways, what do you guys got going on in there? How are people doing in the chat? We got BCC in the house. What's going on, BCC? It's good to see you, man. We got Comic Ozzy in the house. What's going on, Ozzy? Thanks for stopping in. Neo Cards and Comics. People still make videos about comics. I know, dude. Listen, guys, I got to tell you. Okay. First order of business. Are we feeling good or bad about the hobby? Well, let's talk about it from a social media aspect, social media component, right? I think that's one metric we can look at to determine if comics are doing well or doing poorly. Now, the reality of the, say, vintage comic collecting side of YouTube is that 2021, 2022, those were the easy days. That was the easy mode. That was the freebie views. I could come out and make a video, 5 keys to pick up before it's too late. And then I could just make five books and boom, there you go. Crazy video, crazy views. Nowadays, people are not into that. You got to dig a little deeper. You got to it's harder to make the content. So you have to grind a little harder. So that's at least my experience. And I think that does show true to a lot of other people who I talk about. So I say all that to say this, as far as the interest of comics is concerned, there is still growth within the space, but it's, that vintage side was really easy during 2021. And I think that's reflective of like the prices, the values, and all those things. All right. Anyways, we got our first guest in the house. First guest in the backstage, friend of the channel. I'm going to bring him on now. Jesse, good to go, sir? All right. Well, here we have it. 1/3 of the comic industry show. Jesse James. What's going on, Jesse? Good to see you, man.
I'm doing very well. The number one rule in any type of open phone thing is not to go first. So at some point you have to say, well, maybe you got to be the first one to go. So in this case, we're the first person to go.
I'm glad, because you got to throw me a line, because I just got to keep going until somebody hops in.
Right, exactly. Where I wanted to start off was where I started to get to your question today of where the market is, not just for a consumer, but for a seller, a store owner, publisher, retailer, all that fun stuff. I started in January 25th, 1982. I was given my very first comic, which I have my props for this show, actually. So my very first comic I got was January 25th, 1982. That's my very first comic. I was standing in front of the Friendly Neighborhood comic book store. I was a punk skater, and I was standing in front of the comic book store door, and the guy came out and said, "Can you move from my door?" And being an ass, I took one step over. And he came out and he said, if I give you this comic, will you just leave? And got on my skateboard and I went home, and I must have read this at least 1,000 times, upside down, the ads, everything. And I was just intrigued. And so I wanted to collect comics. But as a 12-year-old, how do you collect comics in 1982? And so my parents would give me $1 for lunch. I would stop at Safeway. I would buy 4 packs of Bubblicious for 25 cents each. And at lunch, I would pimp them for 50 cents each. So I would have $1 for lunch and $1 for the dime bin at the comic book store. So I would go across the street to the friendly neighborhood comic book store, buy my 10 comics, learn how to ride my Huffy Pro sport bike with my 10 comics in my hand. And that's how I got started. So I would do this 5 days a week. And one day a guy came in. The owner was in the back. He walks up and he walks right to the back. He grabs a Batman #2 off the wall and walks right out. The wife comes in and says, oh, we sold the Batman #2. And he goes, no, we didn't. And I, being 12 years old, I said, well, your buddy came in and took, I think he's borrowing it, not knowing anything. So these two are arguing in the back, and they said, we need to talk to your dad. And if people know my dad is the guy in Vegas, one of the first box runners in the casinos and all that stuff. And so, yeah, you can talk to my dad. And they thought I had stolen the book. And what happened was they called my dad. My dad walked in and said, starting tomorrow, you'll then be selling comics for Comic Book Bag and Boards. And that's how I started, right?
Wow.
So I was working in a comic book store at 19 years old as a 12-year-old. By 13, I was already running the store because I was just into comics. And the key thing about comics is this is my very first sell. First comic I ever sold. The register is actually bigger than me. The register weighed about 100 pounds. And so you go through this course. And the one thing that I've learned through these 43 years of selling, you take a $20 bill and you say, what can you get for $20 with your money? If you're a new issue fan, that gets you about $4 or $5. If you're a dollar bin guy, it gets you $20 $20. If you're a key collector, you might be able to get one book. But the whole thing about comics is there is always buyers, there is always sellers selling off their collections, and there is always someone selling comics. It never ends. The cycle is, it doesn't matter where the market is. It matters is how you're reaching that customer base.
Right. To that point, can I ask you, what would you say of the eras? Say, take 2025 and compare it to, I don't know, let's go to like 2015, and then let's go to 2005.
Right.
What eras were harder to sell comics, or is it harder now than it was before? Was it easier back then?
I'm the worst person to ask that, because I'm the guy that sells at 12:30 a.m. to 3 a.m. live streaming.
That's true.
I don't believe in there's not a bad time to sell comics. There's always a good time to sell comics. But I will tell you, in 2005, where it was, you had to go to a swap meet to sell. You had to go to your local comic book store and hope they had an open day where you could trade, or you had to go to a convention. Conventions weren't bountiful, and it was very hard to know if there was a convention on, unless a buddy told you, right? You got to keep in mind, from 1960 to 1995, our source of buying comics was a spinner rack at 7-Eleven or Circle K. So then we evolved to the internet, right? And then we evolved into forums, right? Forums were very big. Forums were the big things way before what me and you are doing right now. And so you really had to know how to write in a forum and how to get your post up there. So 2005, a very good era, a lot of publishers, a lot of opportunities to buy books. I was actually living in Boca Raton, Florida at the time, so I had like 10 stores to shop from. They were technically affordable for the time. If you get down to 2015, which is kind of funny because that's a chop-off date. 2015 is 1 year before live streaming starts. So 2015, right? Live streaming starts June 16th, 2016 is the first day comics are live streamed. Okay, now people are going to say QVC back in the day, but 2016, June 2016 is the first day that comics were live streamed, which was me and Sean Hudaku from Comics Elite. So 2015 was a year where a lot of stores, you got to keep in mind, we had about 5, 6, 7,000 stores at the time, were deciding how to stay open. It was a big, big moment in the comic book industry because at the end of the day, your options were only eBay, swap meet, convention, and your store.
Right.
And not very many store owners can go to swap meets or will go to a swap meet.
Right. That's
not
interesting.
Not a lot of stores will go to a convention. Go ahead.
Yeah. Because even though it was in a way like that's 2015's kind of peak MCU, peak movie, we're in the middle of it.
Right.
You still had to go to these very specific channels in order to like buy that thing that you wanted. Like I mean, of course, eBay was there, but it wasn't maybe the same beast that it is today.
Right, exactly. To give you some timing there, in 2014, it was myself, Midtown, and Mile High Comics who do the first ever comic book eBay exclusives. And we were the test market, and they never did it afterwards, right? Because it didn't really work. Comic book stores really weren't ready. It was still the notion that if you were to own a comic book store, you had to sell comics out of your store. That was technically the rule back then. Anything that you did different, you were blackballed pretty fast in the industry. Oh, you're not doing it that way, right? Even myself, when I was considered the first store to have points for comic books, that was, no one could figure how I figured that out, you know. And I'm talking to the whole comic book industry at Summit. I'm saying everybody gets points with their airlines. I haven't created anything, but in the comic book industry, we're very drastic. So 2015 is that year where stores are on the brink. MCU is on the way out of as far as contributing to stores. When MCU first came in, comic book stores would get free tickets to pass out to the consumers. We get this huge envelope.
Yeah. Can I ask this?
Sure.
What about the profile of the buyer? Do you notice a difference in who you sell to these days in 2025 versus 2015 and 2005, or do you kind of feel like it's been a little bit the same all these
so I did a great picture, and I wish I had that picture for you. I took a picture in 1983, and I stood on a counter and I took a picture, and there's a room about 40 12 to 15-year-olds. And it was this amazing, fun picture. Everybody was rocking and rolling. They had their dollars. They had their $5 to buy books. At that time, I don't even think we had comic book boxes. We were using like just like an egg carton box to display our books. And I took a picture in 2017, and I stood on my counter, and I took a picture. And you know who it was? It was the same kids from 1983. They were just older. And so we've lost the way to capitate or bring in new clientele. And that's going to be a challenge for the next 50 years, next 100 years, because we're never going to solve it. I think there's people that don't want to solve it. And so the consumer base bought differently in 2015, right? They're kind of buying on eBay. Store exclusives are now back into the mix, right? At that point, I was doing 20, 25 store exclusives a month because they were easy to do, and not many stores were doing it. There was only like 10 players in the exclusive world. So the consumer was still technically paying cash. They were still technically paying with their credit card. They really didn't have PayPal accounts that they were then spend money on, or Square and all this other stuff. So customers were still comic book fans, right? In 2015, flippers were kind of coming in. Flippers have always been coming in, but in 2015, it was still the natural comic book collector who was just filling runs, right? They bought Avengers new issues. Why? Because they had to complete that run.
Yeah.
Options for cover Bs were very small.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I don't think we're going back to this like more, what do we call it? Wholesome idea of people collecting comic books. I mean, there's always going to be readers and stuff, but if you look over at the Pokemon world and how much the flipper collector or whatever you want to call them has kind of taken over that side of things, I kind of just feel like that's, even if you get the young kids on, I think that they like that stuff. I think it's like in their DNA to want to flip and trade, and we'll come up with friendlier terms for it. Just kind of make the hobby pay for itself. I think they like these ideas. And so,
right. Well, I think
because,
because you keep in mind, there was one platform, well, two platforms, right? You had comic book store and you had eBay. That was your platforms. And then we started adding these platforms. So if you kind of want to add 2016, live streaming starts. And live streaming is this world where if you're going to do live streaming, you better freaking commit to it. You can't be doing what I was doing. My bill every week was $15,000, $20,000 a week with Diamond, but then I'm trying to flip books on eBay. Or I'm sorry, on live streaming on Facebook. So I made that choice to say, listen, I'm going to be a live streamer. I'm going to keep my store. I'm going to do both. Why can't I do both? But I just don't need to spend 15 to 20,000. Let me sell what the number one rule in any business is: sell what you got before you go out and you buy more stuff, right? So, so you got to sell what you got. So live streaming comes into play. So we'll skip from 2016. Now we get to 2025, where we have now learned that it's no longer, I'm going to sell you what you need. Your consumer is telling you what I want you to sell me. And that's the world we are in, right? So we have to pivot more. The consumer has so many choices, Swag. It is crazy to think that there are 77,000 plus people that sell comics on eBay. There's only 1,300 comic book stores.
Right. Yeah, so that's something that kind of gets, I think it's lost in the messaging of comic shops are closing, but it's like, well, how many online accounts are there though? That's
right, exactly. So, and the rule, what I tell people is, if you ever see a store that says they're closing, read what they actually say. There's two type of people that close. Well, there's technically three, but the two type of people that close their store is someone who's retiring, which you never retire out of comics. So trust me, they're still selling. I've never met someone who is retired that isn't selling comic books still. It's the most craziest thing, right? Mm-hmm. And the number two person is, oh my gosh, I forgot my train of thought there. There's two type of people. The other person, the other person is who closes their shop but goes online and goes live streaming. And learns like I have learned. You got to keep in mind, I had an 8,000 square foot store. I moved to Florida. Now I'm going to open up a store in Florida, but my 150 square foot studio has already done more in the last quarter than the 8,000 square foot store did the whole year. Guess what? With 90% of the less of a budget, right? Because I'm not paying my $10,000 a month rent, not paying for 17 employees and all that stuff, insurance, power. So the consumer today, and the consumer today is smarter. They know how on a live stream show to AI a product while it's at auction, and be able to AI it in about 3-4 seconds to see what it actually sells for. And so I am between Orlando and Daytona and Disneyland. So I'm in like the most awesome place. And then Tampa Bay right down the road. So, but we'll end up going somewhere in that area. But so that's kind of where we're at in those three phases. We haven't changed since I started in 1983. You're just getting less for your dollars, and the consumer is smarter than you. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. It's interesting. I want to go back on what you said about the moving to online stuff, because while I have you, because there's nobody else in the chat right now, so I'm going to keep using
Right, sure.
Jesse in case anybody else wants to jump on.
Right.
Link is, in the description. But I know you guys talked about this on your channel, but while I have you, I figure maybe we should just kind of flash it here in case people missed it. But there is that headline. Excuse me for the advertisement, right? I don't know it's going a little crazy, but I'll just read the headline. Deadpool co-creator Rob Liefeld says comic shops are too unreliable to debut his new Youngblood relaunch with them first, so he's selling to fans directly. So that kind of gets to what you were talking about with, needing to go online and being a shop and stuff. I guess let me get your thoughts. Like, what did you think about the Rob Liefeld's quote?
So I have known Rob for a very long time, extremely long time. He has done solids for me. They're unimaginable. I've actually broken 2 Guinness Book of World Records with Rob Liefeld. So I do have 2 Guinness Book of World Records. Rob Liefeld did the cover. I did that with 115 other creators. So he has always been in my corner. The one thing with Rob, when he writes something, what I tell people is give it a 48-hour cycle. Now, if you wait 48 hours, guess what his new message is? Oh my gosh, look at all the stores I'm going to be doing store signings at. Why? Because he knows how to create the buzz, get people to react. And those people that react, he now says, well, how can we work together? Oh, we'll do a store signing at Golden Apple. Oh, we're going to do this now over here. Why? Because he's just always trying to grab your attention. You always need to be the #1 read no matter what. And sometimes you write something stupid that does not make sense. It does not matter. You need to be in that news cycle 24/7. So me personally, I look at it differently. I don't even, the old story is you need to learn how to read what someone says, but read what they're actually telling you. Because it's usually not what they write. It's actually the opposite. And in this case, this is what he is. He is amazing. No matter what you hear about him, at the end of the day, what is he doing? He's creating comics for his comic book base. And I think that's a good thing to do, to be hitting your customers. Customers like to be part of something, right? They want to be part of a team. They want to be part of a group. This allows them to be on Rob Liefeld's page right now, talking to Rob about what he's writing. Oh, I'm with you. That comic book store doesn't have anything. How do we get them more involved? And then that guy goes, talks to that store and says, hey, Rob, or hey, Steve, I just talked to Rob Liefeld. Maybe we can do something with them. Maybe we can get more books in. So I think that's kind of the key to it.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think would happen if, so with the diamond stuff, it all kind of goes down, and let's say that they all fold and all the shops close and that are, in the red right now. And, in the ashes, Penguin and Lunar kind of say, you know what, it's too much dealing with all these sort of individual people, and they strike individual shops and mom and pop stuff. And they land some big deal with like Target, and Target just decides we're going to carry comics. And it's like, that's their one client. And now all comics are in Target. What do you think in that scenario would happen to comics? Would that be a good thing overall or a bad thing?
Well, you got to keep in mind, there's two types of customers. There's a customer that buys back issues that barely spends money. A back issue collector will go 80-20, right? 80% back issues, 20% new issues. A new issue customer traditionally buys just new issues. Why? Because their whole budget is for new issues. They can't afford back issues.
Yeah.
And so when you're in your comic book store and you're selling books, and the new issue guy comes in, you're kind of like, okay, well, I can kind of go help him, but I already see his boxes over his budget. Or a new issue guy, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to sell him a Coke. I'm going to sell him a Snickers bar. I'm going to sell him this shirt that just came in for Captain America because it's a retro thing. And so the regular comic book fan won't care, will care less. If you look in general, if you were to say to your customer base, and anywhere you can ask this question, if the 50 customers that came in and your store on Wednesday and you said, where do you get your news from? 40 of them would say, I get my news from you. Most people don't read Bleeding Cool Comic Vine, you know, and this is no slight on YouTube shows, but look at the views. So if you get 10,000 view on YouTube for your comic book show, that's what a actor gets in 3 seconds, right? Or even 1 second. And so I don't think it Target carrying any big box carrying comics and not comic book store hurts the industry, because your turn rates are better, your margins are better, right? Comic book stores are where they then do. They're going to sell comics.
Yeah,
there are ways.
Well, let me ask. I guess there would still be vintage stores in this scenario.
Right, sure.
Of course, there's still going to be, you know, more niche hobby places, because people will always want to go to those for various reasons. I guess maybe the question I'm trying to dig at is there a spiritual reason that comic stores need to exist for the hobby?
Let's put it this way: a comic book store collector or a collector has 52 awesome days a year. They know they have every single week, and that's Wednesday or whatever that day is. They come in to pick up their year. They have 52 weeks or 52 days a year. Name any other thing really other than TCG, obviously, where a guy or gal goes once a week to a store to say, I'm here. This is the funny part. I've been doing this for so long, and I've been selling to the same customers for so long. There are customers, if you own a comic book store, folks, this is what happens on new issue day. Swag is then coming at 2:15. John is then coming at 2:23. Steve is then coming at 3:05. Every single week, you know, you have these customers come in. But John and Steve will be coming in for the next 10 years and will say hi to each other, but actually won't know who they are. But if John comes in and he doesn't see Swag, the first thing he says is, where's Swag? Well, he's sick today. Well, what are you talking about? I see him every time I come in. Why? Because it's their comic book therapy. It's their comic book therapy day. And if we can give these folks comic book therapy 52 weeks or 52 days a year, plus all the other days, your average, you probably see a customer 75 to 105 times a year, right?
Well, the truth to that answer of that question is that I didn't go in because I bought it off of eBay because I needed it right then and there.
Right, exactly. So is it okay if it happens? Yes, because comic book fans are then pivot to whatever. They might bitch for a couple of minute or so. Comic book store owners are then say, oh my gosh, I don't have that $3,000 bill coming in every week. Wow, this is great. Comic book store owners will always get new issues. You cannot cut off a comic book store owner. And if a comic book store is in here right now, they know we have so many options to get new issues other than Lunar, Penguin, and Diamond that it's so immaterial. It's literally immaterial. So is it good for comics to get into big box? I think absolutely, because it's one more eye. If we could do both and they could put on that back page, here's your comic book store locator, just put in the zip code so you can get issue 2 or issue 1 because you bought issue 5 from us. That's great, because when someone goes to a Target to get a comic book, there's no experience there. You then do two things. You then say, man, who's taking care of this area and why are all the books bent? Or, oh my gosh, I got my book. And then go to the counter and the person's not even then be looking at what you bought. And zero comment.
Yeah.
That forces everybody back to the comic book store.
Yeah.
Or whoever.
Right. Well, it'll be very interesting to see, you know, how it all plays out. But Jesse, I got a new person in the back here. So I want to say thanks again for hopping on.
I just want to say one thing, just to finish what your question was actually originally. There is no better time in comic book history to be selling comics. There are more platforms to sell to. There are more consumers to sell to. And you are being helped by so many algorithms and Meta, and everything at your disposal. So the only excuse for you not being successful in the comic book business is you're not selling to people who want comics. So everybody have a good week. I appreciate your time. And don't forget to read a comic.
All right. Thanks, Jesse. Well, there you have it, guys. Jesse James, 1/3 of the comic industry show on Beyond Wednesday's YouTube channel. Be sure to check them out every Tuesday night. Always learn a lot listening to him. But, thanks so much again for everybody hanging out in the chat. But we got to go with our next person. We got Chris in the backstage. Chris, you ready to go, sir? I'm going to assume that that's a yes. But hey, Chris, what's going on, man?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for hopping in.
I'm not a retailer or anything. I'm just a regular comic book collector. Even though that's slowed down a whole lot the last even 15 years. I have a comic book collection over here of like 1,300 books. Currently, I'm working on trying to collect as many of the first 100 issues of ASM as I can. But one of the things that I want to ask you is about maybe comics going forward a little bit, because I've seen that they're gonna reboot the Amazing Spider-Man series soon.
Yeah.
And even with all the reboots that are going forward, do you think that the back issues of Amazing Spider-Man that we have now, how would that affect, if they're going to do a reboot, how might that affect like back issues and stuff, in your opinion?
I think that let me answer this in two ways.
Okay.
There's the pessimistic way, and then I guess like the optimistic way, right?
Okay.
Which is, the pessimistic way is something that I always think about, where if you guys imagine every Wednesday, new comic books come out.
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about like, there's an economy, or there's a certain amount of money that everyone has in their budget that goes into comics collectively across the entire collecting hobby, whether it be for a new comic book or a vintage comic book. And every single Wednesday, we add more and more supply to that, that hobby. Right. So, which is totally fine to do that, so long as you have more people that are coming in that are collecting, or more people that want to put more money into the hobby themselves. So to what you're saying is like, would it ever affect back issues? I mean, I guess if people kind of feel burnt out because it's a new #1 issue and they're sort of like, oh, again, and they kind of get disillusioned and they're like, I don't really want to collect anymore. And then it kind of demotivates them from going into a comic book store. Mm-hmm. Then they're unlikely to buy that back issue that's in the glass case. And then, you get that with little grains of sand, and all of a sudden you build like kind of a mountain. So that's my pessimistic. But my optimistic one is the other one, where it's like, you have to, in order for people to continue to want the vintage comic books, in my opinion, you have to continue to get new people into the hobby.
Exactly.
And I think that new people, whether it be because it's just old and it's not appealing right away, and it's more, it takes a acquired taste to like start to appreciate vintage, or it's a knowledge gap because they don't even know what an AF-15 is. Like they have to go into a shop for the first time and buy, oh, this is Spider-Man #1, it's new. Oh, cool, I want to read about Spider-Man. Like you have to like rope them in with a new thing. And then eventually, if they like it and they enjoy it, they're going to start to do that work, and they're going to go down the rabbit hole of like, oh, let me watch this YouTube show about people breaking down the story here. And then, oh, what's the stuff behind this person's head? Oh, what's a comic book? Oh, it's an old one. Oh, what's that? So it's like kind of, brings them into the hobby. So overall, I think that the vintage stuff is always going to have a place. Okay. There's always going to be people that want it. Like let's call them like the real true keys, the AF-15s and the early ASMs and all that stuff. And what goes on in the current market probably doesn't have too big of an effect.
Okay.
But I don't know if
that's kind of another one of my concerns too, I guess, is because, I grew up reading comics, and I would get a stack like every week, but the last 15 years or so, that's changed. And I have a lot of the complaints that other people do as far as how the stories and the characters are being treated and all of that. And the X-Men's villains are now on the team and all of this stuff like that. So the only thing that I'm reading now are kind of licensed books, like Transformers from Skybound,
Yeah, that's great.
Which one? Space Ghost. I'm reading that, and I like that a lot. Even though the writer is very liberal on Twitter, he hasn't let that seep into the Ghost book so far. And I'm just like, every month I'm waiting for it to change, but it's up to 12 and it's been fine so far. But those are the ones that I'm like, and it's only like 2 or 3 of those that I'm reading versus any superhero books, because I'm just so frustrated with Spider-Man and the X-Men. And I was a Marvel guy first, but even if it was a light week, I'd pick up a couple DC books, just to see what was going on over there. But since I'm not really going in there that much, I'm not really picking up anything else to even try out. So it's affecting everything that Marvel and DC are kind of off their square.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that's going to get fixed.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're getting at a really important point, which is that idea that it's too expensive to continue to take a flyer on a book that is like, well, is it going to be any good? Like, are you really going to get your value out of it? And for the most part, like they haven't been able to keep up that level of consistency. I mean, for kind of a long time. And so there's just a point where it's like, yeah, like, I mean, you can't know if the current Spider-Man is going good or not without like other people telling you that it is. And then it just kind of creates a place where, you know what, I'll just wait for the trade. If it becomes like a really good storyline, I'll just read that later on. So yeah, I don't really know how they get out of this cycle. And this is kind of why they're on that, what do you call it? That treadmill of like, well, let's just do the number one, because they know like enough people will get sort of curious enough to like, all right, well, let me give this a try, and they'll take a flyer on it. And so
because I heard
I don't know how you get out of this.
Yeah, because I heard they're gonna bring Gwen Stacy back maybe, and I'm like, how will that affect the price of 121 and things of that nature? So I'm just like, what are they doing over there?
Well, a little anecdotal thing. One time I did do a video. I don't know, it's probably lost in the YouTube ether somewhere, but I did do a look at, do ASM 300 homages have an effect on ASM 300? Because like you would think that it dilutes it, but it actually brings more attention to it.
Okay.
So maybe all of a sudden people will look at 121 all of a sudden if Gwen Stacy is, in current comic culture.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah.
But that's all I had. I just wanted to ask you those couple things and see what you thought.
Yeah. Well, hey, Chris, thanks so much for hopping on. I really, really appreciate it. And, be sure to hop on the next call.
Oh, no problem. Thanks.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Chris, great call. Appreciate that. If you guys want to jump in the show, you got something to say, link is in the description. StreamYard here. Come on in. We can talk whatever you guys are thinking, what's on your mind. This is the point of the call-in show. And I love it when guys like Chris call in. It's great to hear from Jesse. But Jesse, he's got a YouTube show. So it's like, he can throw out his thoughts and opinions every week. But someone like Chris, it's like, I'd like to hear from Chris. I'm tired of listening to me, which is why we got to go to the next person. Matt, see you, sir.
Good.
All right. We got pop sequentialism, guys. Matt, what's going on, man? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. It's good to see you here in Vegas, a few weeks back, which was fun.
Yeah. We, for those who don't know, we went to the Red Hood comic store opening and bumped into each other. And did you end up picking anything up when you were there?
I did. I picked up some back issues of Sandman. Not the most PC things to be buying currently, but the hell with it.
Yeah.
And they were in good shape. I mean, it's hard to find those Vertigo books in what I would consider gradable shape. And so I always keep an eye out for that type of stuff. And I picked up a bunch of back issues of the NAM. I'm having this interesting kind of renaissance for old war books. So the stuff that I was reading on the newsstands, and then the stuff that I was buying as back issues back then before I sold my collection.
What's funny is like, I feel like war books have never really had their like 15 minutes of fame, at least in the last, say, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of this like comic boom cycle. Like, there's never been a time when everybody was like flocking to combat or whatever. But I feel like everything is due at some point.
Sure. And I think part of that too is the inventory, right? Like there's not a lot of high quality inventory of those books. They were never considered really valuable in their time. They were pretty much instantly disposable, whether you're talking GI Combat or Sergeant Rock, which ran pretty late in the cycle. I think reading The Losers and The Haunted Tank in that same time frame that I was reading Alan Moore Swamp Thing, and some of those Vertigo books. And if you don't have a decent assortment of like 9/8 contenders, I think that the collectors that gravitate towards the good condition stuff, because it's generally the safest investment, they don't have an idea of how different the prices are from like an 8.5 to a 9.0 to a 9.2 to a 9.4 on those types of books. They're drastic. I mean, they can be 4 times, 5 times as valuable when you start getting up into the 9s. So it could be an inventory issue. Jesse raised a really interesting question, and I think that you may have pulled it out of him inadvertently. And it's, do we need comic book shops? Do we need LCSs, right? Specifically for new comics. Well, I don't know about you. The first comics I bought were actually off the newsstand in the 1970s. And I didn't even realize there were comic shops until about 1985. And when I walked into one, I was like, oh my God, like, this is Mecca. I didn't know these things existed. It was amazing. But it was primarily a back issue store, in the classic sense, where you had a room full of long boxes and just about anything you wanted was in them. So you wouldn't come in and be like, hey, do you have, the Jokerfish stories? They were there. They were right there in the bins. And these guys were going to conventions occasionally and buying stock and replenishing, the back issues, which I don't see that much of anymore. I think people became focused on keys and quote unquote keys. And that's a whole other conversation about what really constitutes a key, what's a real key, what isn't. But I think that the industry thrived before the collectors came into it. And I think for it to thrive again, that has to happen again. It has to be an industry of readers. It has to be an industry of people who can affordably collect things. Comics were 75 cents on the newsstand when I got my first job at a comic book shop. I think they're now all like $3.99 or $4.99. Granted, I looked and I was like, has the page count gone down? And I saw that Absolute Batman was 44 pages, for $4.99, which is more pages than we got in the 75-cent books, generally speaking. But that's kind of a small fortune. It's not like, everybody's doing so much better now than they were 30 years ago that's not going to have a massive impact. The quantity of books that you can read and follow casually for longer is smaller now because the cost has gone up so exponentially. And I don't think I've bought a new comic in at least 2 years, like a brand new comic. I don't think I've purchased one in at least 2 years. I was subscribing and reading stuff online for a while. And even then, like, what was available was oddly not a lot, considering it's the publisher and everything should be up. But another big thing I think that hasn't happened in decades is a new pantheon. Like, the last really new interconnected universe we got was Valiant. That was a long time ago. Yeah. No one is up.
Well, things, some of them are starting and there's a reason they're successful. Like, so you have Jeff Johns is doing this Geiger universe.
Yeah.
And then you have someone like Radiant Black is kind of becoming its own sort of universe. So you have these things that they are starting to do them and they're gaining traction. I think, to your point, I think it's people enjoy that,
Yeah, the interconnectedness that isn't like a massive multiplayer, crazy continuity thing. And I think continuity killed comics. I think that, when Crisis on Infinite Earths came in, it was sort of like the best possible cure to an unsolvable problem, in that it was pretty well written, it was incredibly well illustrated, and it simplified the DC universe. And so that was like, DC was 50 years old at that point. It was their first reset. Yeah. Now there's a reset every year, seemingly. And it's because of continuity. The continuity has become an impossible monster to conquer. I don't think everybody's reading every book on the newsstand. Even if they had the money to spend, I don't think they would. I always hear people who do reviews on contemporary comics that they hate everything. You know, that the only comics I hear anybody talking about are like the G.I. Joe and Transformers stuff. To a smaller extent, the Something is Killing the Children universe. I have heard the Radiant Black thing. Someone was talking about that the other day, even though I haven't read it myself. But I feel like there's opportunity for a completely new set of heroes, you know, that under one banner that people can get excited about. It can be simpler, you know, it could be a throwback to when heroes were heroic and they, you know, it wasn't like, you know, heroes murdering, you know, the bad guys. That if we could get back a little bit, I think, to something that I think the thing that people miss about comics in the old days was almost the naivete. And I think there's been an odd backlash against what some people are calling like edgelord comics, the stuff that I loved. I love the Alan Moore. He's maybe the reason that it happened, right? Is Alan Moore was sort of this edgelord, and then you got people like Garth Ennis, who is like edgelord, you know, high comedy. That I think he's the only person who was in on the joke half the time. But that now everybody writes like that. Like it's too simple to have, you know, oh, let's write a story where Batman kills somebody, or, you know, like, or Spider-Man kills somebody. Like that kind of breaking the basic mold of why people love characters with codes is that it seems to be missing. It seems to be lacking in the everyday world. So comics aren't an escape anymore. Comics have become a loud echo chamber of the same problems we have in the real world. So if you're not getting something out of that, if you're not getting that flight of fancy, if you're not getting that dose of something a little bit sunnier, then I can see why people are leaving in droves.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because I think that this is an issue that has been cultivated also in like filmmaking and other entertainment fields. Because as you say those things, and it's sort of like, I put it like this. I'm always sort of surprised, like, why don't movies or comics or video games just do the bit, is what I call it. Do the bit. Like, you got your joke, you got your performance, like, do it for me. That's what I want to read. That's what I want to watch. And the reason that they can't is because, like, when you are in these systems and structures and studios and stuff, everybody thinks that you have to give something that the audience hasn't seen before, because they're constantly talking about all these things. And it's hard to sell an execution-based idea. And what I mean by that is like, hey, I'm going to tell a Superman story that's, you know, about hope. It's really, you know, he's going to save Lois Lane from this guy, but it's just going to be really good at that. And really good at that is sort of hard to pitch in a boardroom, because the reality is, like, boardroom people, they don't get it. They're not creatives. Like,
and it turns out it's hard to write too, right? Like that's not an easy story to write.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to write, but even when someone writes it, they can't understand it. They just cannot. Like, you would think that people who make these decisions could understand, but they don't. And so that what they understand is like, oh, this high concept idea is going to get headlines. Oh, like, you know, this is interesting. This is different. And that's how they have to think. And so what that ends up producing is a lot of what you said. Well, what if Superman wasn't the hero?
Right.
You know, and so like there's all of a sudden you get those ideas. And we've been in that space for a long time. And I think you're right that the only places that those types of stories can exist nowadays is when someone who's an independent person doing their own Kickstarter just wants to write that.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to go back to basics and tell simple hero stories. You know, like when someone does that, then that audience finds that, and then everyone really enjoys that world, you know, that they created, because that's what they're looking for. So I think that's kind of the space that we're in.
And the big publishers, I think, have made this mistake of writing for a reader that doesn't exist, and then not even trying to find that reader. So, like, you know, I think a lot of the pushback, and I've always considered myself to be fairly liberal, and I'm kind of surprised sometimes now where I'm like, am I not that liberal actually? You know, like, am I actually at the center? Has the center moved? And what I mean by that is that these ideas that could be good ideas if they're well executed frequently aren't well executed. But more to the point, even when they are well executed, it's not like DC or Marvel are taking out full page ads in LGBT publications and saying, hey, look, we've got comics for you. This audience, you should love what we're doing right now on this book and this book. I think, I wrote an article with using the demographic breakdowns of, people in society readerships, the amount of characters in comic book films that are giving representation in a much larger way than they do in the real world. And again, not that comic books or comic films should or have to reflect the real world, but if you're changing the formula at the expense of the people that are reading monthly, that's going to come back and bite you in the ass if you're not going after that readership that you quote unquote want. And so I think there's a lot of writers, you see it with musicians a lot, right? Like where they're producing material not for the crowd that goes to their shows, but for this idealized crowd, the people that they want to sing their songs to. And all it ends up doing is alienating everybody. Like the people that used to love their music no longer love their music and start to boycott them. The people who weren't into them aren't going to be into them because it's not like the music has changed just because they changed a couple of lyrics. It comes off as sort of a lot of virtue signaling without a lot of wind behind it. And I've certainly been, I think, in the same types of meetings that you have. You have the awesome Emmy in back of you, which I do not. But having been at meetings at most of the major studios over the past 40 years, and now working where I do in video, basically library titles, distributing Arrow and companies like that. The people running the show don't really get it, but they haven't gotten it since the early 80s when the hedge fund guys came in and it wasn't creative people running Hollywood. But in publishing, they really should have an idea about what the task is. I remember that there was that kerfuffle in an issue of Immortal Hulk, where the new version of the Joe Fixit type character in Immortal Hulk kind of goes into a jewelry shop, and it's written backwards. The artist was Brazilian. He does not speak English as a first language. He misspelled something. People took it a certain way. There were 3 editors on that book and a writer who all saw that artwork before it got published. And none of them saw it. None of them said anything about it. And yet, when none of them did their job and that book got published, who felt the heat? The guy that drew it. And
right.
And I think wisely, because he had made some posts prior that were really supportive of Bolsonaro. I don't think he's as supportive as Bolsonaro perhaps now as he was when he first posted those things. And I'm not in Brazil, and I'm not going to tell people how they need to vote in their own country and what their own issues are. But that he wisely kind of just said nothing and just kind of took the punishment because he was afraid it was gonna go worse, because clearly, as a guy who doesn't speak English as a first language, he wasn't going to do a good job defending himself. And he just kind of sat back, and he's starting to get work again. But he lost 2 major books because editors didn't do their jobs. And that's kind of mind-blowing, and when you see that, and we know just in print media that editors are fewer and farther between, that a lot of that pressure is getting thrown back on the writers to just get it right the first time. Anything online is a fiasco. I see typos in the New York Times, online edition all the time. So it's not just limited to, quote unquote funny books, but it's sort of a shame that as those things go away and become less perceived as less important in expense by the publisher, that those are the people that still get to keep their jobs when something goes incredibly sideways. And that was, the writer went crazy on his collaborator of 50 issues without even talking to him. And it's that to me was kind of shocking. That's maybe the biggest shock of it, is that this guy that he worked with, and of course he waited to say anything until the final issue was in the can, and ready to roll. So it wasn't going to really upset the apple cart. So not exactly a profile in courage, but the fact that he felt the need to come out and hammer away at this dude he'd worked with for that long without even talking to him was another kind of bad part of that thing in this industry. That right. You do have incredibly polarized positions, not just from the readers, but from the creators themselves. And I think that the reactions that they get exacerbate it. I can't stand Ethan Van Sciver, but there's no denying that anytime someone says his name, it's like Voldemort. It's like you give him power. and then it gives him an instance to troll again. But there's people like that, that would be supposedly in my camp, that are a little bit more on the left, that have a little bit more of a want to be inclusive, but their publishers aren't supporting them on these things, and they're skewing away from readers who really love their stuff because it's either too many cooks in the kitchen or not enough oversight, and the product just isn't as good as it was.
Yeah. Well, I think discourse obviously has, gone out of control in every single field there is in all of, humanity and culture. So comics is not, an exception to that one. But I do think that it just focusing just on the product is really a big part of what they need to do. But I'm also a little sympathetic to the people that have to greenlight a lot of titles, because this is the attention economy we're in, and it's how do you cut through the noise? And if it's just a good book that's just good, what's going to get people to sell it and or read it or want to buy it, outside of it being whatever, some big thing some movement I feel like I need to get on board with it, even if it's not a political thing. It's just whatever this book is, even if it's just absolute Batman, it's just new and crazy. But I guess I'll tie it back to the original thing that you sort of asked, which was the LCSs. Let me ask you, what do you think the hobby would look like if all of a sudden comics were carried by Target? And I'll do one further. I kind of think that the LCSs have been the marketing tool for comics basically for the last 20 years. So if they were just in Target, assuming we lose all the marketing of the LCS, but you gain organic foot traffic from people walking in Target, does it equalize, or do you think that there's less buyers with comics? Does comics go away with it?
Well, as someone who works in physical media for video, Target got rid of all their physical media. So I can't see Target being the company that's going to embrace comic books. But as an example, I get it, as a kind of blind example. So, it could be Walmart, it could be Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble would seem to be a really good home for comics. But in order for it to make sense, their shelving, their hardware is suited not to floppies, but more to manga. And so I've been saying this for a couple of years, that I'm surprised that the whole industry hasn't already moved almost entirely into digest size comics, because they're sturdier on the shelf. They sustain less damage. I will say that they're far less likely to get a perfect 10 or even a 9.9 when it comes to grading, just based on the shape of them. But which is only going to affect the collector market, which is a secondary source of revenue, and the publishers don't care about the value of a comic once it's left them at wholesale price. But I do think that it would require, to your point, a large section that people know is dedicated to comics, so that kids know on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, whatever the new release date's going to be for comics in a major big box retailer, which is going to be different than it was for mom and pop shops, that will be a signal for that Saturday for the kids' parents to come, and they're going to buy their latest, Sue Grafton, book, and the kids can pick up a bunch of comics. I think that works. And I think that just as comic shops pretty much were, in the 70s, they were head shops. They sold, bongs and pipes and comic books. That was kind of the thing. It wasn't what it became, although in a way it's the same thing, right? I guess if you say that a Pops figure is the modern bong, and that the people that are buying them are clearly on drugs because they're not going to be worth anything, then it's not so dissimilar. But comic shops have always had to pivot and kind of figure out what's going to bring the money in, while different aspects of the hobby go through different changes. I've one of my favorite guests you've ever had on, and I know I made a video that was critical of it, but I love Sean Cermak. Sean Cermak is one of my absolute favorite people to watch. And he has legitimately affected how I've diversified my collecting, because he reminded me that I loved other things before I loved comics and while I love comics, and that some of them are a better investment right now. So I find myself buying coins and currency and stuff like that. But is that a thing that needs to happen? Do comic shops need to become sort of pop culture collectible hubs that aren't just comics? Now, people who only collect comics are going to be unhappy about that, but they've been unhappy about, you know, the Pokemon card games in the side room and everything too. But I don't think big box being the more direct distribution model is a bad thing, because they're still going to find sub distributors. So there will always be an AEC or somebody that will sub distribute to comic shops at a 5 or 10% thing.
What's kind of shocking to me is why Marvel and DC can't commit to more consistent titles. Well, you know what? I guess it's not shocking, because it's like, I feel like whatever they're doing, they've determined this is the best way for them to make the most amount of money, right? Whether that be, we're going to put out 15 Batman titles and we're going to do new #1s every 3 issues and go to a new creative team every other month. Like, I guess that's the best way for them to do business. But going back to the big box thing and talking about manga, it just sort of feels like, wouldn't they just want to be like, you know what? Hey, we're going to commit to Matt. You're going to write Doctor Strange for 30 issues. You got the whole story. We're going to commit to you. It's going to take you a year. You know, you're going to work on it, and we're going to invest however much it takes us to produce this. And then we're going to put out, you know, the first 6 issue trades in Barnes and Nobles every other month.
Yep.
And that's ongoing Doctor Strange. It's very clean and it's all uniform, and it goes in Barnes and Nobles on the show. It feels like they could just commit to that in a way, like a movie studio would be like, hey, here's our movie. Here's our slate for like the current year. We're just going to do these projects.
Here's our release date. It hits this release date come hell or high water. But I think that that's kind of the problem, right? It's not the writer, it's the artists who have 2 major problems. And why the digest thing would be especially a problem for an artist is that instead of getting paid every 22 pages with a 3-month holdback, they're getting paid every 90 pages or something, you know, a much longer thing.
Which is why I'm going to say something that it's going to be extremely unpopular. But this is why AI art is going to come into play at some point by these companies, for sure. Like, the pipeline to deliver comics, I think it's only a matter of time before the AI art takes over. And the reality is, I think consumers don't care, in truth.
Yeah, they don't care how the sausage gets made. They just want a good hot dog. And which is painful, right? Like, I mean, I collect artwork, you collect artwork. Congratulations, by the way, on that amazing acquisition.
I bought some new pieces, by the way, guys. And so I have that. And yeah, I'm fully addicted now. I'm fully addicted.
I mean, if I shift, let's see if I do this right. Yeah. You got Sid Mead, you know, original painting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So that was from his monogram, The Dragon Stream, the same company that did the studio, the Wrightson, Jones, Barry Windsor Smith, Kaluta book. I mean, that will make artwork a little bit more valuable. I think it will make the older analog hand-done stuff a bit more valuable, because it will be seen as something that's obsolete and beautiful and appreciated. But I mean, card art has been computer art for years, mostly. And so, like, often if you want to buy like Magic the Gathering card art, you're really buying like a prelim, because most of the finished artwork is being done on Wacom pads. So for AI to come in and take the place of artwork that is already 90% computer generated, and if you look at, you know, the diaspora of collectibles and you include trading cards, most trading cards are probably digitally created, right? You know, and I think a lot of comics are digitally created. They may be hand drawn on a Wacom, but the artwork isn't the same thing that we used to. And I've got a room full of, you know, 1-of-1 artist proofs by Bruno Redondo. I love his stuff. But it's going to change that hobby too.
It is. And you know what's interesting? And I know, guys, it was very unpopular for me to say the AI. I see like a little bit of the discussion going on with the AI thing, but food for thought, guys, food for thought. Think about this. Like, just a year ago or 2 years ago, think of how many conversations were in the hobby about AI art, and think of how many people were going like, oh, is this AI? Look at this person doing AI cover, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And now you don't hear anything. Now, let me ask this.
It's only when there's like, you know, a hand with 2 thumbs on it or something that people like notice.
Do you not hear anything because everyone said, you know what, you're right, I'm not going to do AI anymore? Or do you not hear anything because that's how good AI is becoming?
I've seen, you know, that there have been a lot of improvements. there's a lot of AI being used in improving recording and film upgrades. So it used to be if you went from a 2K to a 4K that you would have to do a line doubler, and it was considered like a fake upres. Now by using AI to boost that stuff, as long as you've got somebody that has some notion of color, it can look really good. But then you've seen David Fincher used it on a couple of upreses and got excoriated for it, like that it was not where it needed to be just yet, and his films are too high profile. People notice that stuff in his movies, you know, like, so you see stuff in the background that has clearly been AI fixed, and it's like circles don't look like circles. But yeah, I mean, in 3 months, it might be perfect, you know, and we will not really notice it. And you still need someone who's going to know the prompts. I thought that the good thing about AI, to the extent that it would be helpful to artists individually, is they could scan their own work, not bring that AI online, and just having it on a laptop not connected to the internet, use their own artwork in their own style to help them do their prelims and kind of set up their storytelling and improve their storytelling ability by giving ideas that's already in their artwork that can come with a couple of preset sort of layouts and be good. But of course, nothing is going to stay that way, right? Like, it's going to connect to the internet. It's going to turn into, you know, something that's being used, you know, not exactly by permission, but through like a long list of, you know, things that you're supposed to sign off on that are longer than a refrigerator is tall, but written in like 2-point font. So people are agreeing to have their art used and not realizing they're agreeing to it, and people aren't happy about that. So I get both sides of the argument. And as a guy that ran an art gallery, I like analog art. Yeah.
I think that there's probably going to be like, I mean, here's my copium, I guess is what I'll call it. It's like, I think that maybe there's the growing pains in these, you know, this little transition area, but I have to imagine that kind of like when you, like, you know, if you play like a song on social media, you're going to get flagged by like Universal Music or whatever, right? There's going to be a world where AI art knows who it's pulling from.
Right.
And there's probably going to be some system where it's like, hey, Matt, your style was used for such and such comic, and here's like the royalties getting paid back to you. And it'll probably be all calculated on the blockchain, and they'll be able to keep tabs of all this stuff. And like, I think that that's probably what's going to end up happening with it. So like the people who created the style, will get their compensation in some way. That's my hope.
Yeah, probably naive. It's probably going to be like Spotify money, right? Like, it's going to be like 16 cents. You may not know this, but in the UK and in Japan, if you want to license music, the artist doesn't actually get a say on whether or not they want to license their music. It's a flat rate, and so if you release a 70s music compilation of live performances, then it calculates how many performances are on the disc, and based on that, and based on the standard SRP for that type of product in the marketplace, it calculates what each artist is going to get from each unit sold. And I think in the UK, because they do things differently about warehousing, where you get taxed and where you don't, that it may come off of the amount manufactured. And that's probably also true in Japan. And you probably realize that like an album, a new release album, like on CD in Japan, costs about 4 times what a CD costs in the United States. Most of that is publishing rights that's secured and performance rights for the artists. So that gets built into the cost of the CD right up front. Will that happen in the US? That will be interesting to see. Like, you know, will we have these systems like with, if you've ever owned a shop, you've gotten a call from somebody and they'll be like, oh, we heard that you listen to the radio in that store and you have to pay BMG, you know, $4.99 a month and for a 3-year contract or something. There's like 10 of those companies now. It used to be just one. Now there's a whole bunch. So a lot of places, they changed the rules that it has to be at least 6 speakers. It has to be a certain amount of square footage. A lot of people are just like doing the Spotify license, where you can play Spotify, you know, in your store, and through your subscription, it pays into those kind of publishing rights. But I could totally see that happening. And I'm very happily and luckily not reading the comments right now. So I'm not seeing that we're probably both getting torn apart for even mentioning the fact that, AI could be, taking over in that way.
No, chat's great. Chat's got a great conversation going on with the whole AI thing. And again, we're just throwing out thoughts and ideas here. I'm not rooting for AI. Although, if Skynet is listening, I've been faithful from day one.
Yep.
But
I don't need octopus. They're too smart. When our overlords return, I don't want to be torn to pieces. So I'm not eating octopus.
Yeah. Well, it's probably gonna happen at some point, and so I'm hoping for the non-Black Mirror episode version of it.
Yes. Hey, well, thanks for having me on. I'm sure there's a list of people waiting to get in here. Great to see you in live time, face to face. On the interwebs, and obviously a big fan. You see me liking and commenting on your stuff all the time, so I will continue to do so.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
All right. Great call right there. We went from AI, we went across the board. We went to, God, what did we talk about? We talked about the LCSs, big box places taking over. A lot of stuff, a lot of stuff going on in comics right now, which I guess, goes back to the main point. How are you feeling about the hobby these days, positive or negative? I think there's both. I think there's a lot of great things to think about in the hobby, a lot of positives. I said to you guys, I just bought some new original art pieces, which was great. I bought a couple back issue comics, which was a lot of fun. Back issues is always fun buying that stuff. So I'm still, having a lot of fun in the hobby overall, but there's other weird things. But shout out once again to all you guys hanging out in the chat here. If you guys want to hop in, StreamYard link is in the description or in the chat. You got something to talk about, something to say. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep riffing. I'm just going to keep talking. Now, here's something that I mentioned this in a video, but it was about my Whatnot Hulk packs, which I don't know if you guys have thoughts on those. Let me know what you guys think about the Whatnot Hulk packs. I mentioned this for like 2 seconds in a video, but I feel like I could have made a video about this in and of itself. And this is something that I think is really funny because it's like when Pokemon shaped Cheetos sell for nearly $90,000. How are we feeling about collectibles these days? Like, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Does this make you feel positive about collectibles, or does this make you feel like we've lost the plot? You know what I mean? Like, does this feel like, holy moly, we've hit peak Beanie Baby ridiculousness? Did you guys see this one? $90,000 Cheetozard. I guess someone pulled a Cheeto, out of their bag, and it looked like Charizard, and they got it graded or slabbed or whatever. Pretty amazing. If you think about it, remember the story of the person who saw like Jesus's face in the soup? Like, if you could send that to CGC, like, imagine how much that would have sold for. Like, this is where we are. This is where we are. But this is the funny thing about collectibles. And Sean mentioned, Matt brought up Sean from Reserved Investments, and he talks about this all the time. And he's been on the show, and we've had these conversations of like, there's no logic in collectibles. There's no logic in what people value. It's just, do people want to pay the price that is being asked? Does someone want to pay more than the next guy? And apparently, they wanted to pay $90,000 for Cheetos because, that's just a flex. There was another art piece that sold. It was a popular piece in the modern art world where I think it was like, you guys correct me in the comments, it was like a banana that was like taped to like a piece of like a whiteboard, and it was like modern art. And I was like, here you go, it's a banana, and it like sold for like a ridiculous amount, and that's what art is, man. It's just a status symbol. It's just a flex. It's a meme. That's where we're at. It's like, can I buy this thing that is just a meme? And this is why people buy NFTs too. It's crazy. It's crazy. All right. Well, we got another caller in the chat. 2 times there. Still only 35 cents. Good to see you, man. You ready to cop on? All right. Hey,
how you going?
What's going on?
Very well. It's good to see you too. I thought I'd pop on because I was a little. This whole 90,000 for a Cheetos and the Hulk packs. It was something that it struck me because here I am buying vintage books, and I'm looking at these prices and going, well, why wouldn't you buy a vintage book rather than a shaped Cheeto? So
it's true. Why? I guess that's and even outside that, it's sort of the whatnot pack discussion, which is like, well, why wouldn't you buy the Hulk one?
The Hulk one,
from 2008 versus the current whatever the whatnot ones are selling for. And I don't know. I guess it's just that collect what you like. People aren't always buying stuff because they are thinking about its secondary market value. I think they're just buying because they want it.
I suppose so, but I think the
or maybe not.
I think the whatnot. I like the foils, right? I like them, but I don't feel like paying through the nose to get them. And who knows? They'll probably like anything, right? They'll be hot for 5 minutes. I'd be interested to see what the first packs from whatnot are doing in the secondary market now as well. If they've dropped.
I think I have to assume that they did, but I think that there's probably still some value in there that people are paying for it. Like last time I checked, and I think some of the, like the one of ones and stuff. Well, the question is like, I don't know if a lot of them have, sold or been posted or whatever. So who actually really knows? But I mean, I think there is some value there. There's still some people that want it, which is cool, I guess. I don't know.
I sort of get it. I do get Marvel Rivals. I think that's interesting because it's driving demand. It's got a new generation. I'm not sure about this new manufactured rarity. I think that's the thing that again, it's one of those where I looked at all those packs and I go, how many copies of the Hulk or Hulk related can you get? Like if I was buying one, I think that's fine. But it's the fact you get. I saw someone open like 3 or 4 packs, and they ended up with like 4 of the same book in different flavors. And it's like, okay, I sort of get it, but I wouldn't want that many books.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that because it's like it's all moderation. Because on the one hand, it's like I can pick up one, and you can kind of get a little bit of fun out of it, and there's nothing sort of wrong with that on its surface.
If it's priced right.
If it's priced right. And if it's not positioned as this, like, it is positioned as you're going to win this grand prize, but like there's this kind of implication that it's going to have like this excess value for it later on. And one of my critiques with the whatnot pack so far is like, there's no transparency on like what they sell for. Like people on whatnot just have them, and maybe they started for $1. But it's sort of like, well, I mean, what's the retail price? That seems.
Exactly. I haven't said. I've deliberately stayed away because of that reason and seen all the FOMO and just have you seen what prices they're going for? Because ultimately that's it almost needs its own GPA or like fair market value report where you can at least see what you're going to be getting into.
100%. Well, here I pulled up just in case we got into it. So there's this gold foil. I don't really remember the breakdowns. Limited to 300. So this is $51. Here's a box of 3 for 400. 410. So that's pretty consistent. So
wow.
I guess that's see. This is my question. It's like, so this person buys this box for 400, but it's very unclear, what the seller who had that bought it for. Like if you knew that the box, like, because the comparison is to like say sports cards or like a Magic the Gathering box, like there's a price. It's like, oh hey, these boxes retail at $149.99, and then it's like if it sells up to 400, great, cool. I mean it's just what it is. But
that's the thing. There's no RRP, right? You need an RRP to be able to set the bar and go from there. I think I'd love to know how Whatnot are distributing them. Like, I'm assuming it's just that they have a cost price, and they're just buying as many packs as they can. But yeah, again, it's one of those where are people weighing them? By the way, that's the other thing I was wondering, because trading cards you can weigh them as well, right? And find out if you have foils inside. But
yeah, isn't that the story? Aren't people like doing like metal detectors now for
in
packs?
cards? Yeah, in cards
Yeah.
they're using, I think they're X-raying them now. So
Oh my
yeah,
God.
it's getting ridiculous. But yeah, back to my original point, I would much rather take the original, copy that came out over that. And again, for $410, you can get 2 or 3 of those keys in CGC graded, knowing full well that that's at least I'd rather have that. And and again, looking at these expensive other manufactured pieces, I'm like, may as well go and buy a Silver Age key or something like that, and know that you've got something that I think that these new ones tend to lose value much more quickly, or don't even hold them at all. So that's why I'd be like, it feels like it's a good way to get money out of collectors' hands, but I don't think it necessarily gives them anything forward, with a few exceptions, right? Like some of the rare variants that have sort of blown up and stayed consistent.
Yeah, I think it's the mindset of when you're buying it. Are you buying it expecting that this is going to hold value? Then you're going to be severely disappointed in a few weeks from now. Or if you're buying it because you're just like, I just want to have it now and get the dopamine hit of opening it, then go for it.
Yeah, I'm disappointed with it, but yeah, I will still be going after the vintage collectibles rather than the modern manufactured.
Yeah. Well, Dave, while I have you, from one hot topic to another, quick question:
Sure.
Have you, with everything going on with tariffs and stuff, you're in Australia? Have you heard from like any CGC things, or have you sent any books in recently, or is that anything in that space?
No, so I haven't submitted for a long time. I'm back in the US at the end of March for WonderCon, so I will be submitting then. So I'll be doing a few books then. But I've deliberately stepped away from grading for a while. I've actually gone back. I've actually sort of changed my collecting habits and gone back to much more raw books, and only grading when I think that there's I want to conserve the book, or or I'm potentially looking to sell it. So yeah, there's no tariffs that I'm aware of for Australia. I think we're not in the scope at the moment, and if it was,
that's true.
It would be something else. But it hasn't really affected my submissions as yet. But I think other things have affected my submissions, because the CGC debacles over the last year or so have sort of put a damper on a lot of my submitting, and I think a lot of other collectors as well, right? It's everyone's taking a very deliberate look at how they grade, because in the old days I was grading moderns, and you'd know that you could be able to move them, and I think with COVID, when it all just slowed down, a lot of that stopped. So I think that's a good point back to you on when you were talking about speculation and how it's sort of has not disappeared, but it's really muted at the moment, right? There's not a lot of spec books going big, with some notable exceptions. And so I think that's also driven a lot of like people not submitting books to CGC anymore, because there's not really that spec market that there used to be.
Yeah. Well, like you said, like there's no sense in paying the fees to get it graded unless you are, going to add that value to it when you sell it, or, if you want to just have it because you like how it looks in display, that's one thing. But, for the most part, the margins are so small that there's no sense in sending it in unless, like you said, you have like a really expensive book that you intend to sell and you want to get the value out of that.
Yeah. I think the other thing with the reason why I drop them off at like things like WonderCon is that it is from Australia, very expensive to ship books. And so it becomes a lot easier to sort of hand carry, take them and drop them off. And I think there's a lot of people that do that, even in the US, right? They just don't want to take the risk of moving books through the postal service.
Right. What's the culture like out in Australia for comic collecting these days? You get a sense of it in any way, or is there like a kind of a bustling community out there?
It's a bustling community out here. We've got a number of there's a number of YouTube channels that are out there covering various different things. We have a number of our own little comic fairs. The issue that we have in Australia is that there's just not a lot of inventory, right? And particularly high grade inventory. So if you're a collector and you don't really care about the grade, there's a decent amount of books out here. But if you want high grade, you can't find them too often over here. So it's much more of a, like, you have to do the usual online or do international to try and find those sort of books. So, but yeah, it's a bustling community. We have, we've got our own sort of Australian prints as well, which seems to have got a lot of a boost globally in terms of interest. So a lot of the foreign variants globally are sort of taking off, and Australia's got its own sort of early Silver Age, and then also into we've even got Australian price variants of some Marvel books at the tail end of in the 90s. So that adds something to give us a little bit of something over everybody else that people come to Australia to look for rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I think the foreign variants are interesting. I can't say that I'm like anywhere like an expert on them, but like I think that there's so many people that really love them, and there's cool, like when you start to learn about it, you learn like the rarity aspect to it. And I don't know if that stuff ever catches on, say like mainstream in comic culture. Will people really tune into, say, like the Australian variants or the Pence variants or things like that?
Yeah, I think the Australian variants there's an interesting one. There's a Daredevil issue 1 that was a reprint of just shortly after, and it's got a completely different cover, and it's beautiful. And again, it's one of those that sort of it's in a niche at the moment, but I do know that Heritage are now running foreign variants or foreign prints as an auction. So I always think when Heritage is doing something, generally it's starting to build momentum and I'm not sure if it'll go mainstream, but if you've got the first appearance, if you've already done your run and you've got the first appearance of, say, the Hulk or Daredevil or Wolverine, then you will probably invariably want to start collecting all of the alternative prints globally, if you go that deep down the rabbit hole. And some people do.
Yeah, I like, I've heard people talk about like the thematic ones. So like, for instance, maybe you get like a first appearance of Black Widow and it's like the Russian version of that.
Yes.
And it's like, books like that it's like, oh, that's actually really cool when it feels on brand,
Yeah. I collect a lot of UK stuff because I'm originally from the UK, which again gets very expensive because I'm buying in the UK and shipping it to here and then grading it in CGC. So it's, but it is an interesting, you get to the point where there's only, you've collected a lot and then you start looking for other areas where you can sort of fill it out. And so I'm guilty of that, where I'll try and find other stuff. But I do think a lot of it, again, comes back to that nostalgia, right? Not manufactured new stuff, but going back and finding those books or that you read as a kid. And, for me, it's like I did read the US comics, but then I also read the comics in the UK as well. So that's why I was collecting both. Right.
Well, Dave, thanks so much for hopping on, man. It's good to hear from you. You got anything else really quick to leave the people with, or? No,
all good. I just wanted to pop on. It's a pleasure as always to catch up with you, and love the channel. So thanks a lot and for having me on. And,
likewise, everyone out there in the chat right now, go sub up. Still only 35 cents. Go sub to Dave's channel. He's got a great YouTube channel as well. So make sure you guys support him.
Hopefully I'll see you at WonderCon.
Yeah. See you there.
Take care, mate.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. Good to hear from Dave. Good to hear from, the other side of the world where people still collect comics over there. I spent 3 months in Australia back in 2014 for a project. I was working there. It was awesome. Sydney, like, you know, when people ask you, they're like, okay, if you didn't live in the US, where would you live? I know the real answer should be something like cool and unique and be like, oh, I would move to like, I don't know, like Argentina or something. My answer is Sydney, Australia, because it's like the most like, you know, it's still exactly like the US, but it's a little bit different and it's awesome out there. I totally would move there. Anyways, we got a next person in the backstage right now. Carl, good to hop on? Hop on. All right. Eating dinner.
Up, guys?
In character for the current title from 24/7. Carl, what's going on, man?
I thought it was very, very proper to be the first Mumbuck streamer on Swaggle House during our Bladesmyth campaign. So here I am eating a bowl of pho.
I feel like my channel's growth is going to go exponential with this type of content because let's face it, guys, comics has a ceiling. But if I did a food mukbang channel, I could have 1 million subs.
I've just been listening to you all afternoon, and it's been fun. I've been running errands today. Took a little bit of home time to get cleaned up. But as you know, we've been running Bladesmyth, and this is the last week. So we're all in. But it's interesting talking about just like comics today, and you talked about Pokemon cards, and even the gentleman before me was talking about like the vintage versus Pokemon. What's been interesting for me is I've been selling a lot of my vintage Magic graded cards, and really I'm still profiting off of it, but it's not at their height, and I'm still okay letting them go because I feel like there's been like a distance from the current market to what vintage buyers actually value. Like we actually used to value the lore of the game, but now like if you look at the releases this year, you know, Final Fantasy, Spider-Man, like all these like crossovers are happening. I just feel like the next generation of Magic players may just not value the nostalgia of these like Power Nines anymore. And so I literally just let go of a Mox Emerald yesterday, and I think I did okay on it, but still, like I normally would let go at that price, but I still did. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because that's interesting you say that because it's like. Yeah, like how strong is their universe, their own IP? I did see that they announced that they're coming out with like a dragon set that's in universe, and some of the comments, at least on the Instagram post, were like, finally, like a Magic set. You know, I think there's a little bit of that fatigue of the crossover, but it's hard to not want to go down that route, which is like what I feel like one of the earlier conversations we were having where it's like people trying to write new stories and break in, but people like it's hard to do that because people are more used to the franchises and the stuff that they like buying. And it's easier to sell, you know, a Magic crossover with whatever Final Fantasy than it is to like break a new IP because that's what people know. So
I think so.
It kind of makes sense that you would sell it. And it's now that I know about the art world, and you think about like getting the more rare thing. I mean, yeah, it's cool to own, you know, a Power 9 card, but like, does the Power 9 art exist?
It does.
You know, you could own that.
The Black Lotus art. And then recently traded hands. Yeah, it recently traded hands. It's on a 5x7 card.
Wow.
But it was undisclosed. They don't know how much they sold it for. People are guessing like in the 5 to 10 million range.
Yeah, you would think because
I
think it was $1 million for the Alpha card, Black Lotus.
3 million, 10.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was the last public price.
Crazy.
Well, let's talk about comics, man. What I missed earlier because I tuned in like probably like half an hour ago. So what have you guys covered so far?
Well, we talked about you know, we talked about selling and the changing of going from LCSs, like should it have, you know, obviously everything's going online, but also would there, you know, be a future where if comics went to say Walmart or Target, you know, would you need even comic stores at that point? Do comic stores add any extra value to the hobby or the end user, or will, you know, Marvel and DC and stuff just move to, you know, bigger chains and stuff. And I think that probably you don't need a comic store other than whatever the kind of community spiritual thing comes from it, that, you know, you can't really quantify like on a numbers basis, like why it's a good thing that there's comic stores there. But I'm sure that they serve some purpose. They become like, you know, the place to gather, the North Pole, the lightning rod for the hobby. And I'm sure they do a lot of good for the community. I mean, a lot of stores do game nights, like Magic nights and things like that. So you still kind of need them. They have like some value, but yeah, that's kind of, we were speculating on that.
I thought it was interesting when Matt talked about how physical media is no more at Target. I didn't even know that. I thought I saw books there. Maybe just I thought I saw books there just like 6 months ago, or like DVDs. And so maybe it's a new thing for this year where they actually pulled out, because it makes sense though. But at the same time, you know, Barnes and Noble. When's the last time you've been to a Barnes and Noble?
You know, I actually went a few weeks ago to pick up a book, but that was a rare exception of needing to go. So yeah, it's been a little while, although I enjoy going to it.
Yeah.
I think you know, it's like, I don't need to go there, but every now and again on a lazy Sunday, it's kind of nice to stroll into a Barnes and Noble and look around and grab a coffee and just kind of be outside.
Yeah. At the Americana, my wife and I, we go there. We usually do the whole mall, and then we'll end there the night, and we'll spend like a couple hours there. And she kind of does her own thing. I do my own thing. And literally every time I walk in, they're popping. And so I think something's happening, because this year they are opening 60 more stores. So if the trade paperback destination kind of figure itself out, I think it could bloom with the growth of the stores. Because manga's, you know, growing like crazy. If you go like just look at the shelves, there's probably like 6 to 1 manga to comic trade paperbacks, which I think, you know, makes it pretty powerful.
Yeah, you know, the interesting thing with comics, I feel like you know, they're constantly competing against other entertainment fields, and there's advantages and disadvantages to what other places can do to get attention and stuff. But I feel like the one thing that comics has, and they don't lean into this, and I don't know who the governing body of comics would be to push this sort of thing, but I feel like comics is one of the kind of one of the last sort of nerd pop culture hobbies that you can have that still takes place in the real world, the physical world.
True.
And there's a yearning for that. And I think that if you could push that messaging of like, hey, yeah, comic stories are fun and all that, but you know, hey, you know, come outside, come to a comic book store, come hang out with people in real life. I think people are craving that. So I don't know if that's a Marvel and DC kind of top-down initiative mandate, get to a comic book store day, you know, something that they have to kind of create. But I think that there's a
free comic book day
there.
would be that, right?
Yeah,
free comic book day
is that.
Yeah,
it's that. But you know, I think something more that they could, you know, push. Which
did you guys talk about the Comic Cons and how the buying habits may have shifted?
A little bit. Why? Do you have thoughts on that?
I did. I think similar to, remember we came from music, right? Like how often we used to like go visit our friends at some of the smaller music venues, right? Because they'd be playing all the time. You go somewhere like down Sunset, and there'll be like bands playing all down Sunset. That's all gone, man. Like it's because everyone goes to the music festivals, and they go a few festivals, and they like consume every band they could think of, and it's crazy. It's a vibe, right? And I feel like the conventions, in a way, kind of took over what the community aspect that comic book stores used to provide. Because you do look around, like a lot of these like variant retailers, like where do they thrive? They thrive at the conventions, man. Like they dropped a you know, San Diego Comic Con exclusive, New York Comic Con exclusive, and they're killing it. And so I feel like maybe that's just what happened, and you kind of need to find like a balance of strategies when it comes to engaging the market and meeting everyone where they're at.
I think you definitely need that. You need I feel like Comic Cons need a little more like what would you call it? A headliner in some way. I mean, San Diego kind of has that. There's a lot of fanfare, but I feel like what's the next evolution for a Comic Con outside of, just sort of being a trade show, which is fine. But like, kids they need a little something. Like you said, they need a festival. They need a little pomp and circumstance, while you're there. And I feel like cons could do more of that in a way. Well, that's why cosplayers exist. Well, before I let you go, Carl, let's really quick. Let me ask you about this. Tell us about Bladesmyth. Really quick.
Oh
Tell
my
people,
God.
3 days left.
First of all, I don't believe there's 3 more days left. So you guys play the trailer, and you'll know exactly why I'm eating a bowl of pho while talking at Swagger House today. Because Bladesmyth is our version of Kingsman, but instead of being suitors by day, assassins by night, these guys are master chefs by day, assassins by night. And they have their knives. And I think there's going to be a beautiful series because there's nothing out there like it. It's like Food Wars meet John Wick. And the creators themselves, Justin Kalen Chen, he's a TV writer. So he worked on like Brother Son. He worked on Bel Air, sequel to Fresh Prince, Lindsay Park, and Kreese. Kreese is a Marvel artist. He's done like Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and your boy Swag right here did the trailer, man. So yeah, give us some props and go show some support.
For sure. Well, if you guys are interested in checking it out, here's the link in the description. 3 days left. We're in that place where it's like a lot of people are
Almost there.
More and more people keep going to the crowdfunded space and looking for, unique, pun intended, flavors of comic books that exist out there.
Yeah, man. It's all about the pho and the live Monblock streaming.
Yeah. 4D chess marketing right there with Carl.
It is. Immersive experience, guys. All right, Swag.
Yeah.
Happy Sunday. We'll talk soon.
Likewise. Bye.
Bye.
There you have it, guys. Carl Choi, 24/7 Comics, the first ever food stream on the YouTube channel. I saw you guys talking about, pho. I was Carl eating. I don't know if he was eating pho right there. Those noodles were kind of thick. You know what I mean? I don't know. I love pho. Ramen gets all the hype, but pho is the one that you can eat all the time. You ever feeling sick? You ever hungover? You ever not feeling great? Go get some pho. You're gonna feel great after that. Oh, he is eating pho. All right. Well, there you go. That we could be a full-time pho channel here on YouTube. Well, we've been going. I see one person in the back. I see the metal face in the back there, but he doesn't have his camera on. And so I don't know if he's still alive. Maybe he's just hanging on the backstage. Oh, okay. Camera is on. All right, sir. Come in hot on the Collector Collins Show. We got the return. Metal face. What's going on, man? Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Well,
what's going on?
I was sitting down watching the channel, eating dinner with the kids, and I caught some of the, I think it was two callers, or the caller before the guy eating the noodles. Sorry, I forgot his name. You guys are talking about how things have shifted. I don't know. I don't really keep up with like the crowd trends or the mentality of the crowd, but for me at least, collecting has shifted. I recently sold 120 some slabs, and I had a 9.6 ISM 129, an X-Men 1, like the heavy hitters.
Yeah.
The ones that every collector would want, and the ones that I wanted. But I just, I kind of just started to see that these were pretty common comic books, you know what I mean? So I'm like, let me just sell these, and I made a pretty decent chunk of change. I mean, it was a 2.5 X-Men 1, a 9.6 ASM, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I sold them, and I'm like, what I really want to get is back into at least what comics were for me as a kid. Like having them, being able to hold them and read them. So I'm not one of those don't grade type of dudes. Like if you want to grade them, go ahead. And I still will pursue that, but for a very small niche type of book. And those are like the one-offs, like the uniques, the double covers, for instance. And I have an example if I could pull it out.
Right.
So I have a double cover of this bad boy here.
Nice.
And as far as I could tell, this is the only one that's ever sold ever in the market, and this is it. So if I'm grading anything, or if I'm going to buy anything that's graded, it's going to be these,
Yeah.
you know, the unique, like those, or like this one. It's Mark Jewelers.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that if you're been someone who's kind of gone into the Mark Jeweler space as well.
Yeah, so it's going to be from now on. It's going to be that, and you know, the rarities, the oddities, because if you're collecting, you know, X-Men, trying to go after X-Men 1, you know, if you want to do that, go ahead. But they're so common, you know, like you could go on a live stream or an Instagram account and buy one. Like these, you have to like search. So I think for me, at least, this is a little bit more challenging and fun. So that's if I do get them graded. But if I have to be honest, I just love going after the ones that no one does, like these.
Yeah.
These, I mean, I don't think a lot of people know about these, but yeah, these team ups are amazing. They only made 17 issues of this with 2 giant sizes. So I think total, it's like 17 or 18. So I've managed to find all of them, and this is what I'm going to do. So at least for me, and a couple of other people that I know, you know, they've kind of gotten over the whole, I need to get the X-Men 1, 4, 5, whatever. You know, a lot of people that I know are going after the oddities, if you will, like the double covers, the Mark Jewelers. And to be completely honest, if I'm going to get anything like this, they're going to stay raw. Like I don't know what it is. I just woke up one day and I'm like, these are going to be like these suckers right here. I think everybody knows these. They're going to stay raw, and they're going to go on back there, they're going to go on a vintage comic rack. So for me, at least, I'm going back to the fundamental, you know, what the nostalgia really is. If I'm going to be grading anything, it's going to be very intentional. And if I'm going to sell it, it's going to have to be like something that I'm willing to sell, because like this Mark Jewelers or the double cover, those will never leave the collection. So I think in total, I think I only have like 25, less than 25 slabs that I kept. And the ones that I kept are like the hard to finds. Like I have a 9/8 Web of Spider-Man 118 Uzi.
Yeah.
Those are like super hard to find, because I think if you're a collector and if you ever had a try to get that one pressed, it's hard to get a 9/8 because of the paper stocking. It's got like I think it's got like a little white envelope in the I think it's like 2 pages in. There's like a little white envelope that leaves an indentation. So it's kind of hard to get that. So those are the ones I'm going after. So I think what piqued my interest in wanting to call you is like the shift and the changing in collecting. I think for me at least, it's like, yeah, you know, it's cool to have you know, a TOS 39 like the one you have back there, but again, those are like pretty easy to come by if you have the money. So
100%.
So what I did is I sold all of my, like, I mean, some may call me, you know, crazy for doing what I did, but you know, I took that money, a big chunk of change, that's going to, like, you know, the kids fund. I'm going to be spinning up some savings accounts for them, because, you know, when they're 18 and who knows where the economy may be. So it's gonna be helpful for them. But I think my wife did say, like, look, it brings you joy. Don't get rid of these things. Keep them. But what I really sat down and thought in the dark for a while, I'm like, what really brings me joy is comic books. No matter how expensive or cheap or ridiculous it may seem, like what book it is that I want, like I'm gonna go after it, because I've got some pretty silly ones that some collectors would be like, why are you collecting those? Well, like these, for example, the DC Universe books. Anything I could find with this logo, I go after it. Because again,
it's funny you're sharing this stuff, because I feel like you're not necessarily alone in like kind of that shift. I feel like, especially if you're, I assume a lot of people in the chat, like I know you, like we're all kind of like products of this sort of COVID, comic boom, manifestation in the comic copy. And so I feel like a lot of our interests have changed, and it makes a lot of sense to why you're sort of going to like, you want to have the nostalgia thing, but you want the most like eclectic version of that thing, or the most like unique version of that thing. And for a lot of people, that can be the Mark Jeweler, or, some people said like OA, if you can get like, cool, like, hey, you got like an original art Cable, or something like that. Like that's cool. Like, and I think a lot of people are kind of feeling that. And it's funny with the points you made about, some of the Silver Age keys and stuff. Personally, I haven't really talked about this in a video, but I started to like not change my tune. I've kind of thought this for a little bit, but Todd McFarlane has a bunch of Silver Age keys, and he's got like an AF-15 that's like a 0.5 restored, and he's got like an ASM-1 that's like a restored, and all this stuff. And people kind of joke about it, and they're like, clearly he can afford whatever he wants, but like, I kind of think of it as like, yeah, there's these books are out there that I just kind of want one to like enjoy, and I don't feel like I need to chase like the big thing. In fact, I'd rather take my big money purchases and put it into like more rare eclectic things. So it's like my toss is restored, but I kind of like that because it's like, it's not that big of a thing for me to like have the lowest version of that book. And I don't know. I think that you kind of hit on something that I feel like a lot of people have been talking about recently.
Yeah. Also like hanging on to like an X-Men 125 or 35, whatever it was that I had, and an ASM 12996. Those are, fall victim to speculation and whether or not a movie takes off. Fantastic Four. I got rid of all my, like, I had a FF5 at a 5.5, sold it because when that movie comes down and it's a complete disappointment. Again, these types of books fall victim to that. The value drops. So like you spend $10K on a book like that, and the movie craps out, and all of a sudden it drops by like more than 50, 70, whatever percent. So like, you might as well get out of that and, take the money and then, get into the stuff that's fun. I mean, all comic book collecting is fun, but I also made the conscious decision to get rid of anything that would fall victim to like a bad movie or like stupid speculation. So I'm getting out of it. But I did keep some Doom covers. I mean, I kept all the supervillain team ups. Some of the other ones are all mostly raw, but the only graded Doom related book is this one. And I just couldn't get rid of it. But that was another I think factor that made me want to get rid of like the bigger ones that I had, because you buy them, you get into it like at 6K, 7K, 10K, and again the movie comes out and it's like oh man. So then that unfortunately, like, it follows the market, the value follows. So I think so far it's paid off, like going after the oddities and the lesser known keys, and it's still fun for me.
Well, so much of it is like, it's kind of like what you talk about with the team up books. Something, and people have talked about this before, but a lot of times it's just the hunt. It's just the joy of finding the thing, and it can be expensive, like you with like a double cover or Mark Jeweler thing, or it doesn't have to be. It can be like, oh, I'm just looking for that one team up book that's like raw, and it's at least a 9.4 and higher, and that's your own challenge. But that hunt is part of the joy, and I'm with you on that 100%.
Yeah, I think I've got up to I think 4 9/8 of the supervillain team ups, and if those do get graded, fine. But I think I'd be happy with like a vintage rack with those, and and then knowing that my 10K book isn't gonna like fall to 4K, like I got out of it at 10K, and down the line, if the movie does suck, I could always buy it for like 2K. Where you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah. It'll always be there. Years from now, if you still really want it, it'll be
it's
there.
always going to be there. And like if anyone out there's watched your channel and anyone else's channel, you've always touched on like, oh, the spec is hot on this one, and then like 2 months later, I think a good example would be like a New Mutants 98. Leading up to Wolverine, Deadpool Wolverine, I think the newsstands were going for like what 3,300, whatever it was. Now they're going for like 2K even. The directs were going for like 15, 18. I think in some cases 2K. So then once the movie came, I mean, it everybody knows what's going to happen. Like the movie comes out and the value just like goes down, it craters. So
Insight in mind, out of sight, out of mind. That's common.
So like going after books that may not like fluctuate so much, that will always maintain like a consistent value. I think that's something that I'm going to do. And again, not knocking anyone else's desires to like collect when the spec is hot. Anyone can do that. All power to you. It's your money. I'm not a fan of telling anyone how to spend their money, but at least for me, for my interests, keeping some raw, and then again being very intentional with what I grade. That's going to be key moving forward. 2025 and on. And whatever money that I did make from selling, I think it was like 120 some slabs. Like if I'm going to sell or if I'm going to buy something that's 1,500, I got to make sure that money is making money. It's working for me. I'm not working for it. So I don't want to piss money out and not have anything come back in. So totally. as soon as I see that money, did its job, then I may think about going after something that's like in the 3K and up range. So, but then again, I do fall victim for like, cool looking 9/8 like this one. I've been searching for this in a 9/8 for 6 months, and this one just I won't say it fell in my lap, but it sort of did, way below market value. So I had to get after that. So I think anyone would do that. If you find something that you're after, like $200 below whatever it's going for, then go for it. So again, that's why I wanted to jump on and chat with you briefly.
Yeah, good. Absolutely, good thoughts.
That did pique my interest where the chat came up talking about fluctuations and like interests and how things are shifting.
Yeah, I think that definitely feels true of comics and stuff. It's I think a lot of people kind of are doing what you're doing within the comic space. I think like others, people have fluctuated to some people kind of dabbling in art, some people kind of dabbling in, someone said earlier in the chat today, they're like, oh, I've been getting into the war books. I think it was Matt that said that.
Yeah.
He's like, it's like I've never been to the war ones, but it's like you need that new flavor of ice cream just to like satiate the hunger and stuff. So it makes sense. And I think a lot of people are doing what you're doing, and I agree with your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's still fun going after if you're going after like a Planet Comics #1 9/8, that Dave Stephen cover with Stephen with those two girls on the rocket. What is it? The rocket bike. Yeah, that's something too that's like cool to go after. It's there isn't a whole lot of those, especially 9/8s in the census. I think there's like 70, 74, 75, whatever that is. So that that also falls under with what I'm going to go after, like those cool oddities, double covers. The farther away from the 80s you go, like into the 90s newsstands, those are also like books that I'm after, like anything ASM, as long as they're like keys, those are going to come into the collection, and if they can get graded, they'll get graded. But I think at least for me, it's going to be cool to like have them on a rack. So that's what I wanted to say, and eager to see what I find in the coming months.
All right. Well, keep us posted, Metal Face, and be sure to hop on the next time we have a call-in show, and we'll get an update from you. All right.
man.
Later.
Bye.
Great to hear from him again. Shout out to all you guys out there who have been on the call-in show before, and return guests always appreciated. But sometimes we get new guests, like our friend here in the backstage, Bobby. You good, sir? All right. Hey, sir. How's it going?
Swag. What's up? How's it going?
It's good, man. Good to have you on the channel. What's going on with you? How's the collecting world, the collecting life been for you in 2025 so far?
Well, full disclosure, I've got like a storied history of working in an LCS and kind of running my own thing in comics for the last year and a half, like at a flea market, more or less. But nice. Yeah, it's been interesting to see. I was running an LCS with my best friend for like 3 years or so, and as part of that, I guess I saw a resurgence of behavior and let's say like trends that we saw in the comic market in the 90s, and that kind of left me with a bit of a weird taste in my mouth. For example, just endless variants and non-stop like number ones, mini series that like Alpha, Omega, and then 4 issues in between. That was just kind of I don't know, low effort, let's say, for some of them. So I wasn't super keen with that. And I know that I've been in the chat kind of lurking and contributing a bit. And I know a lot of people are poo-pooing on new comics quite a lot. And I have this weird, I don't know what to call it, like two minds on the matter. On the one hand, I agree with a lot of people that new comics are oftentimes low effort, or they're kind of made to promote a new movie coming out or something of that nature. But on the other, you sometimes get some gems in there and you get some really cool stuff, whether it's indie projects or something that's a little more mainstream, like Dark Knights of Steel from DC was a really kind of cool Black Label story. That's like an Elseworlds, what if the DC universe was medieval kind of thing. And I love that. I thought it was such a cool idea. And I just didn't see enough people talking about it. And I think it's done now, if I'm not mistaken. But there's all sorts of stuff like that. But that's what I've been seeing in the last year and a half, especially.
Well, let me ask you about that, because so you say you had an LCS, or you do have an LCS, work in that. When you talk about like the people, hearing about the new number ones or like these kind of movie tie-in books, like what's like the or the variant explosion? Like what do you get the sense from people that go into your shop? Is it like, are they immediately turned off by it, or is it like they do it and then it's the burnout that comes like a few issues later?
Yeah, it's probably the burnout more than anything that I see most people experiencing. They're excited a lot of times about the variants. It's the Mark Spears variants or the Momoko covers. Sometimes Alex Ross stuff is very popular as well. There's all sorts of variants that pop off, definitely, but there's that, like, I don't know, they're not buying them for the content. They're buying them for the cover alone. And at that point, I try to just tell people, like, listen, like, if you're doing it as an investment, 99% of the time, it's not going to work out for you. And that is like you can almost see the glass pane shatter when you break that news to somebody sometimes. So it's a little tough pill to swallow, but
it's interesting. Yeah. I think the variants and the covers and stuff that and the new number ones, I mean, I'm sure you see the sales numbers every day. That's what gets people to buy it. And it's like, I think we were talking earlier on the call where we're just saying, like, it's hard to sell the story and have that cut through the noise. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of really good comics out there. There really are. Sure. And I know like the macro narrative is that, oh, comics are bad and it's, things aren't good and the writing is terrible and stuff. But like you said, and I know too, like I've read really good stuff. It's just, it's really hard to sample those books, especially as one caller was talking about, just the price. The price is so much. Like, why are you going to, like? Well, listen, do you remember? It's going to be hard for me to buy a Dark Knight, like you mentioned that I didn't even read that title, but it's like it's going to be hard for me to be like, well, why is this one going to be different? you know.
Yeah, there was do you remember back when the new 52 was launching and their whole like marketing campaign was hold the line at $2.99, or I think it was, or $3.99. Either way, what happened? DC comics on average, I think, are way more expensive than Marvel comics all of a sudden, and it's at cover price. But I mean, I'm from Canada, so up here we do it a little bit differently. We have to charge more. Some LCS don't charge more, and they just do cover price, whatever it is anyway. There's no converting going on. So it's kind of all over the place. And in my particular city, we have like a very long history with distribution and comics and all that. So we're kind of spoiled in terms of a local community. We're very, very like it's a bustling community, in my opinion, for the size of city we are. We have like 9 LCS for a city with less than 1 million people in it, like major ones. So it's pretty good. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, since you're in Canada, have you heard anything from CGC? Earlier this week, PSA said that they're going to like, pause Canadian submissions. And I heard some murmurs from other people about CGC Canada stuff. Have you got any ears on the ground with that?
I have ears on the ground, but I've not heard anything quite yet. Nothing direct to me. But I mean, technically I don't run my own LCS anymore. I'm just a little flea market operation now. So I'm not as privileged as the grandiose LCS owners might be, curmudgeonly and old and grumpy as they are. But there are many people who are interested to know what's going on with that, myself included. But for the last year, and I would say, like, I watch a lot of your content, and I definitely have been paying close attention to the Bengate stuff and all that nonsense with like insider theft and a bunch of stuff going on there. It sounded like for a while. I've been paying a lot of attention to that, and people who ask me, I just tell them, like, don't grade your stuff right now. It's dicey. And for us to get a book graded, it costs I think a modern book right now is $85 for us to get it down to Florida and then back. And that's like, I mean, I don't know what the conversion works out to for the Americans. I think it's probably like $50 or so, maybe 45 or something.
85
like
Canadians, probably like what, 5 cents US?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know, but we're having a hard time economically. I'm not sure why, but it's very interesting to see kind of like the American market and how popular and how frequently people are able to send stuff. Because I mean, Florida is a hop, skip, and a jump from most of you guys, from the sound of it, and it's not super expensive. But for us, we're having to send books for $85 a piece. And oftentimes because we have a local community that's very healthy, a lot of guys are just kind of layering their books together and shipping them all off through one central figure, or an LCS might accommodate that. And it's a whole thing. But anyway, that's a little tangential, I suppose. But it's an interesting, the graded thing is very peculiar.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I've heard people tell me that, Bengate is still a thing and it hasn't really been talked about too much, but I don't know. I guess at this point, my theory is that maybe Bengate has always existed and it's just something they can't fix because it has to do with the plastic itself. I don't know. That's what I think.
I don't know. It's tough to say, right? I think I was reading in the CGC forums a while back that someone was saying, like, any book that has, I think the first 2 digits are 4.6 or something like that, or newer, are the ones that they're noticing it the most with. So of course I look at some of my stuff that I had graded that started with the 4.6, and sure enough, like, if you hold it kind of horizontally and look at it head on, you could see there's a thing. So
wait, is 4.6 like the first couple of numbers? That like mean like it was a time when it was
a certain number? I think it's that anything that was done like last summer, I think, and onward, there's 4, like 3 or 4.4 or something like that. So it seems like that's when it's most common from what I've seen. But
so then maybe for CGC, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe if it was just, hey, we had some bad plastic that month or something, like, hopefully. Otherwise,
I bet it was probably them like, I'm sure the narrative everyone who watches your channel regularly probably assumes is that they're trying to fine tune their process with making their cases a little more secure or stable or something. And as part of that, they've caused this. But either way, I actually joined your. Sorry, this is really off topic. I joined your call here because I wanted to ask you a question. I wanted to know what your take on the community is as someone who's like launched an independent comic. It's something I've personally thought about doing for a long time. I know yours was a Kickstarter project from the sound of it. How did that go for you, and what's your read on the community as it stands right now?
Yeah, well, I'll answer the first, Kickstarter thing. I mean, it's been a wonderful experience. If you have the aspirations to do a comic, or someone in chat has aspirations to do a comic, like absolutely you should do it. Like if you have a passion and want to have a creative goal like that, like, being able to work on it and realize it and have people like read it and give you feedback, like it's all very nerve-wracking. You put yourself out there, but at the same time it can feel very rewarding. And so I highly recommend people do it. I mean, it's a lot of work and it's a big grind, and the math doesn't always math when it comes to like, can I make this truly profitable? But if you can put it together, I highly recommend people do it, because it's been a wonderful experience for me, and getting to collaborate with Santiago the artist and my letterer and my colorist, and get to source like variant cover artists that I like and get to work with them and collaborate. Like that's really fun. It's been really cool to do that. As far as like where the community is, I feel like there's different communities. I feel like there's one subset of the comic people that are having a really great time with comics right now. I think a lot of the we'll call them like the tourists have like really checked out, like meaning
Sure.
There's a lot of people that came in during COVID, and there's a lot of people that were in it and they've moved on. Like if they're a flipper, they're in Pokemon now, or if they're, a collector hobbyist, like in truth, they probably overbought and they're probably a little bit disillusioned with like, buying any more stuff these days. So the people that remain, I think are having a really good time, because like yourself or, Metal Face, who was previous, like people are kind of finding their own way in comics right now, and just being like, you know what, like I don't like what's going on with Marvel, but I found like this indie comic I'm really into. And so everyone's kind of like going to their small silos of things that they like and finding what joy still exists for them within the hobby, which is maybe not necessarily like the mainstream, like Marvel DC, but it's like other little things. So I think people are finding that. And, but there's still a lot of, I guess uncertainty with like on the business side, Diamond, and
Sure.
are the movies any good these days anymore? And
Yeah,
are
man, that whole Diamond situation.
Do people like collecting vintage anymore? The value is going to continue to keep going down. There's that element as well. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I think it's also a little quiet. Sometimes I like to have these shows. Here's my thing. Sometimes I have these shows because I'm like, I feel out of touch with what people are feeling or thinking right now. And I'd actually like to hear what people have to say. And it gives me like a level set of like where the heads of the community are, at least anecdotally. I don't know. So that's kind of why I like to do these and hear from people.
Yeah, it's a great format. I try to watch these whenever I can. And it's like you said, it's great to see, even as me, like someone who's doing a retail operation, it's really good to see a little bit of a pulse check, if you will, happening, not just like on my behalf. Obviously, it's a little bit of a different market depending where you are. I know, like, it seems like most of the people locally for me are probably 50 years old or older, and it's really hard to get them to pick up anything that hasn't been printed since, like, I don't know, anything earlier than 1980. It's a tough sell, right? It's, I don't know. They're like, they don't make them like they used to. Argument is really, I don't know. And then I have people who just want to invest, and that's, what can I buy with $50? It's going to be 5,000 tomorrow is a really hard conversation to have too. But I guess that's kind of like, again, where I'll point people to YouTube channels, not unlike yours, that are like talking about the index and what it's like to be someone who is paying close attention to that. So yeah, it's great that you're doing this. And as someone who's like a part of not just like your viewership, but in the community for a profession, like I really appreciate it, and keep up the good work, man.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Bob. I appreciate that. And thanks so much for hopping on and sharing your thoughts. It was great to meet you and listen to what you had to say.
Cool. Yeah. Well, take care and see you later.
All right. Well, there you have it. Shout out to Bobby. Great call. That was awesome. I love getting to like I said, I talked to Jesse. It's great to talk to Jesse. Talk to Carl. Great to hear from Carl. But I love hearing from, you guys out there, like, people you don't always get to talk to, especially since, everybody brings different things to the table and perspectives. And it's good to do it and get in tune to the culture, the hobby. Because I kind of feel like this is the culture to a certain degree, what's going on out there in collector land. But with that, we've been going like 2 hours and 20 minutes, call it 2:30, 2 hours, 30 minutes almost, because I probably could spend another 10 minutes just, rambling on. But I think we're going to wrap it up there unless anyone else has a last minute call. But, big shout out to everybody who hopped on the stream tonight. The Collector Call-In Show is made to be this, an open forum where people can talk about anything they want in the hobby. And I think it's really fun. It's cool to do these, and hopefully I can do more of them. And, I can't do them unless people are willing to jump on the StreamYard. So shout out to you if you're willing to hop on tonight. Really, really appreciate that. Yeah, give everyone a follow. Go check out the Comic Industry Show. Go check out Dave 35 Cent. Go check out the Bladesmyth Kickstarter. All of those things. With that, I think we'll probably wind it down unless there's anyone else. I can just overstay my welcome here and end the show on a bit of a putter. So I bought some more video game original art. And it's funny because like I totally want to make videos about it so I can write it off on my taxes, but nobody cares about this stuff. But I'm going to make you guys care. Okay. We're going to start Video Game OA as a big piece of this YouTube channel from here on out. Okay. We're diversifying here on Swaggle Haas. Nobody cares about comics anymore. It's all about pho, mukbang, and video game original art. That's the new direction for my channel in 2025. I'm just kidding. I know you guys like vintage comic books. We're going to talk about them. Still, I have to do an update for the index. I haven't done it yet. I probably should end the stream right now so I can go on a GPA and start crunching numbers. It's funny. It feels like it's a Monday video. Like, sometimes I think about this stuff, and actually I wonder if you guys get this sense. So like, I feel certain topics are better on certain days. Let me explain. If we have like this dense kind of like comic index video where we're going to talk about numbers and charts, I feel like that's a better Monday, Tuesday video, because it's like, everyone's going back to work. It's Monday, Tuesday. We're in the slog. We got the coffee. We're working on stuff. All right, give me the numbers, Swag. Give me the numbers. Monday, Tuesday. But if I put that video out Thursday, Friday, it's like, I'm thinking about the weekend. Swag, what are you going on about? You're like really in the weeds here. I'm looking at all these charts. Like, this is boring. Like it's Thursday, Friday. I'm thinking about going outside. Let's be honest. None of you guys go outside. Nobody in comic book land goes outside. We live terminally here online. Friday videos are for hauls. They're like haul video days. You know what I mean? Like you take the comics and you just go like, hey guys, here's what I got. That's a Friday video. This is really insider YouTube comic stuff that I'm just pulling out of my ass. I have no actual metrics to justify this. This is just what I've intuited over the years of doing YouTube. Okay, I'm going to end it now. Sometimes I forget that I'm still recording or still live, and I'm just going to ramble for hours on end if I don't stop myself. So anyways, that's all I got for this one, guys. Thanks again to everyone who hopped on the stream. Really, really appreciate it tonight. Had a blast with the Collector Call-In show. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. Go support all those other people with all their other projects. Hit the like. Hit the subscribe. See you on the next stream. Peace.